pretty good, Mrs. Van. Thanks for asking. You seem to cause quite a stir in Waco, though. That's only going to work for so long. Law enforcement's going to have you figured out. That's right. I only kid because I care. 1 Samuel chapter 4. 1 Samuel chapter 4. We're going to look at the whole chapter. Wow. Yeah, it's only 22 verses, folks. So we're good. And we'll cover a lot of this pretty quickly. I heard that. That's all right. Jesus is watching you, Mrs. Van. We pick up here in chapter 4. We just leave where, there we go. It's great when you got a knee that's not quite functioning right and then you lose your balance and then you just keep going. Good thing that was there. It's actually getting better, by the way. But, one day I'll eventually go see a doctor for it. Probably once it quits hurting, I probably will go see the doctor for it. Because, there's all those, it's just... You got to go to the visit. First you got to find a doctor. Then you got to go for the visit. Then he's going to look at you and go, don't do, he goes, well, what's the problem? Well, doc, it hurts when I do this. And then invariably, what does he say? Don't do that. And then he sends you to another doctor who yanks and pulls on your knee, because this has happened to me 3 times. And they're all going to look at me and go, yep, you got a weak knee. We can fix it. Anyhow, I'm way off topic. See the little rabbit pop its head up? Pow! Shot him dead. Now we're back on track. 1 Samuel chapter 4. We've seen over the last couple of weeks where Eli is being told, I, the Lord, am going to kill you and your sons. And I'm going to wipe out your lineage. I used to promise that you would serve me forever, but that's it. I will kill you. Those are pretty chilling words to be said to an individual from the Almighty. And you think about it. As bad as we all can be on our best day, Eli's son really reveled in their depravity towards God. And Eli, we have seen over the last couple of weeks, have kind of known and is complicit in their actions. And instead of reining them in, he lets them continue on, and God said, that's it, I'm going to kill you. Pick up here in chapter 4, because we keep making this theme. When the people of God hold the things of God in contempt, it's very easy for it to continue to get out of control. And then we'll see here next week where that goes to where the people that don't believe in God have absolutely no excuse not to hold him in utter contempt. Let's take a look here in chapter 4. And the word of the Lord came to Samuel and came to all of Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines and encamped in Ebenezer. The Philistines camped at Apec. And the Philistines drew up in a line against Israel. And when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. When the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us this day before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, so that it may come up among us and save us from the power of our enemy. So the people sent to Shiloh and brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherub. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. When you're named with the ark, or when you're named in a situation like this after God says he's going to kill you, it's like the episode in Star Trek when like Scotty, Bones, Uhura, Ensign Smith and Jones. Because we all know Ensign Smith and Jones are not making it back off the away party. Right? They're not making it back. They're going to go out with the ark. They ain't coming home. And as soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all of Israel gave out a mighty shout, and so that it resounded. The Philistines heard the noise of the shouting and said, what does this great shouting in the Hebrew camp mean? And when they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid and said, a god has come into the camp. And they said, woe to us, for nothing like this has happened. Woe to us! Who can deliver us from the power of their mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. Take courage, O men, you Philistines, lest you become the slaves of the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight. So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and they fled, every man to his home. And there was a very great slaughter, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. And the ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were dead. Now Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh that same day with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. And he arrived at Eli, who was sitting by the road watching, for he heard the tremble for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out. And Eli heard the sound of the outcry and says, what is this uproar? And the man hurried and came to Eli and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old. His eyes were so they could not see. The man said to Eli, I am he who has come from the battle. I fled from the battle today. And he said, how did it go, my son? He who brought the news answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines. And there has been a great defeat amongst the people. Your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. As soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backwards on his seat by the side of this gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for the man was old and heavy. Kind of interesting about that adjective there, right? He was old and fat. And he had judged Israel for 40 years. Now his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant, about to give birth. And when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman attending her said, do not be afraid, for you have borne a son. She didn't answer or pay any attention. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, the glory the Lord has departed from Israel. Because the ark of God had been captured, and because her father-in-law and her husband, and she said, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured. Pretty straightforward. A desire to kill your sons, and a desire to kill you, and there will not be any old men in your house. And the one survivor is going to weep. But in the midst of this, we see that their depravity at the temple, their shenanigans at the altar, has led to something even more grossly depraved, and that's the Ark of the Covenant being captured by the enemy. Notice what happens. They go up and they line up for battle. You have the Israelites, they line up for battle, and this is the common battle scene here. The Philistines and the Israelites are going to slug it out well after David becomes king. David isn't even born yet. And on the first day of battle, they lose 4,000 men. And as typical in all of our lives, when we have something happen, instead of going, what can I learn from this? We always go, God, why? Right? Why did God do this? What have we done wrong? Oh, I don't know. If we got 4,000 men, gee, I don't know. You've got two priests back at the temple, raping women at the temple door, and stealing off the altar of God. May not have anything to do with that. Could be totally coincidental. Probably not. So they had this idea. They had this brilliant plan. You know, we'll go back and we'll get our magic talisman. We'll go back and we'll get our magic rabbit's foot. And we'll bring it out to the battle, and our rabbit's foot is going to conquer in our name. Because that's what the ark was for them. It wasn't a holy object where God resided. It wasn't a place where they went before it and offered sacrifice. It was the thing that you called out when you were desperate and you brought it before the army of the enemy and make them fear, because that's where God abides. Remember temples, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first one, and the picture of the ark and everybody, before it like that? That's kind of what they were hoping here. The ark would show up and the Philistines go, and run away. Because we've got a more powerful weapon than you. We've got a box with cherubs on it, because God's supposed to sit on that thing all the time, right? See, when you treat the things of God with contempt at the temple, it's very easy then to take the things of God out of their rightful place, out of the place where they are supposed to be, and then use them as lucky charms. I was watching a TV show and he goes, you know, that book that's got a lot of well-meaning rules, it's kind of talk about a preachy book. According to this, everybody's a sinner. And it was meant as a joke, but the fact of the matter is that's what the culture looks at. And we see that when the ark comes into the camp, the children of Israel are energized. Yeah, we're going to really wipe the floor with those pagan dogs. We'll see here that the Philistines have a higher regard for what has just happened than the Jews do. The pagans have a higher regard for what the people of God do for the thing of God. Let's check this out. Let's pick this up. Let's take a look. Verse 5, as soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, Israel gave out a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. You're in a valley. It's going to be loud, especially when you have, there's more than 30,000 guys there, because there's enough to flee to their own homes. So there had to be more than 30K there. We at least know there's 34K there, because that's the number of dead. Right? Basic math. It sounds out all across the valley. And the Philistines are wondering what this means, and they've learned. Notice what it says. A god has come into the camp. See, for the Philistines, they're polytheists. They believe in multiple gods. And so they understand that, as most of the ancient Near Eastern world is, that you could have a really powerful god one day, and then the next day he'd get his plow cleaned by another more powerful god. And in the ancient Near Eastern world, if my army beats up on your army and I fly in the banner of a particular god, that means my god is more powerful than your god. So they recognize that God has entered. They recognize that something more than just reinforcements have arrived. The children of Israel got a ray gun. They got a nuke. It's kind of like a kid when he finds his dad's pistol. Look at me! I've got something you don't. The Philistines are scared. And rightfully so. I mean, you think about it. But did a god really enter into the camp? My contention is no. Once they took it out of the tabernacle, I believe God left with it. He didn't go with it, he left. Anyhow. And the God has entered the camp, and they said, woe to us. Notice they make that statement twice. Woe to us. Who can deliver from the power of these mighty gods? Now, check this out. They have more respect for the God of Israel than the Israelites have for the God of Israel. These are the gods that struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. It's been a couple hundred years since that event has occurred, and it is still fresh in the minds of God's enemies. See, the Lord went before them and led them out of Egypt. The Lord delivered them out of Egypt with 10 plagues. It was the Lord who delivered them into this land. It was the Lord that delivered them in every single battle. And the one battle where they attempted to do it in their own strength, they got pummeled. You figured they would have learned that lesson, but they didn't. And so the Philistines, they have a better recollection of God's history with His people than His people have with His people. This is the same gods that put a hurting on Egypt. Hey, we got to fight hard, man. We got to fight real hard because we are not serving these Hebrew dogs. We are not serving these Hebrew dogs. Don't care how powerful their God is. Verse 10. The Philistines fought and the Israelites were defeated. And they fled, every man to his own home. Remember when I talked about the story where David went out to fight Goliath and all the men fled to their tent? Remember that? This seems to be a common Israelite tactic. Run away! Run away! Run away! Every man to your own home or tent. If you didn't have a home or a tent, you grabbed your magic whoopee and you threw it over your head. And you were safe. Apparently that is a cloaking device. But notice what happens. Not only do they lose 4,000 men in the first battle, God sets this up to where, and He's got, in this whole event, when we get to chapter 5, God sets this up for the ultimate object lesson for His people to see, and they miss it. So the people hold God in very much contempt. They take the ark out there as though that's going to be a magic talisman, and just pow! The Philistines are just going, pow, pow, gone. And they lose. And 34,000 Israelites are dead after 2 days of battle. But God keeps His promise. Because instantaneously, Hophni and Phinehas are killed. Isn't that what God promises to do? And that's not the end of it. He then wipes out Hophni and Phinehas. And now jump over to verse 12. You have a man from Benjamin. He runs and he goes and he starts telling people as he goes to the city. And the city hears that the ark is lost. Now, here's the thing. Is it central to the religious worship of the Israelites at this time that the ark be at Shiloh? Yes. The ark is now captured by your enemy. You are now a slave to your enemy. And what have you emboldened your enemy to do? Does the Philistines have enough respect for the ark that they leave it where it is? No. They take it as a trophy. See, when we treat the things of God with utter contempt, we embolden the world to treat the things of God with far more contempt. And we'll see in chapter 5 where the Philistines are taught a very valuable lesson about the power of the Almighty that the Jews did not understand. He isn't a rabbit's foot. He isn't a lucky charm. You're not going to steal off His altar. You're not going to steal sacrifices. You're not going to commit abominations at the temple. You're not going to give tacit approval as a parent when your kids are doing those things, because I, the Lord, will carry this action out. And there's no sacrifice. Remember, that was the phrase last week. There is no sacrifice ever that will atone for their sin. And He kills the first two right off the bat. Eli's death, I find, humorous isn't the word. I use it, but it's not really the word. I find ironic, I guess. Let's jump down here. Let's look at verse 18. And as soon as the mention of the ark of God, Eli fell backwards in his seat beside the gate, and his neck was broke because he was old. Now, his neck doesn't break because he's an old man, folks. Why does his neck break? Because he's fat. How did he get fat? By stealing off the altar of God. You see how the writer puts that last barb in. Eli's death is caused due to his fatness, which is caused due to his theft, which is caused by his son taking the choicest meat that were to be offered to God off the altar. Remember, it says, give us the fatty pieces. We will not accept boiled. He says, well, let me burn them first. No, give them to us or we'll take them by force. Eli knows this is occurring. Eli's undoing at his own death was his own gluttony and greed. His contempt for the things of God led to his death. No one walked up and stabbed Eli in the chest. He didn't die from a coronary. He fell over and broke his neck under his own fat gut. You see how that irony just kind of pops in there? Eli had plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't know what my sons were doing. Oh, my son says, oh, it's not good what you're doing. Oh, it's very bad. But go and get that ribeye. That one. Yeah, the fatty one. When we treat the things of God with contempt, and we think no one sees, we still have to answer to the one that sees all. Eli got fat stealing from God. Eli's punishment was that he was killed by his own fat. Very ironic, don't you think? We embolden then also the world to treat the things of God with contempt. We sit and we look. Facebook's a great place to see people do some or post some absolutely inane things. And there's pages that talk about evolution being great, or I'm an atheist and I hate Jesus, or I used to be a Christian but now I hate God, whatever. You could find a ton of them out there. And you go and you read a lot of the people that are on these atheist pages, and they'll almost always begin with, I used to be a Christian, but... Well, one of two things can happen. Either they've never been a Christian, they were Christianized, they practiced the sacerdotal life, or they went to church all their life and they thought they were a Christian, but they never were. Or they were, and then they got so badly burned and mistreated by the people of God that they just said, I don't want anything more with this. Bart Ehrman is that way. Bart Ehrman said, and when we get into Wednesday nights, we're going to see some videos from him because he's a nut, and he's great to put up there. Who said, I used to be an evangelical Christian. And he did. He went to Moody Bible College. He went on to several other schools. And he says, and then I kind of left that. I'm now kind of an agnostic. But I'm only an agnostic because, well, I don't find being an atheist. There, I'll put it that way. I'm going to trip over my own tongue there. And then I'll have to worry about spraining my tongue and not my ankle, my knee. But I'm now an atheist. But in reality, I'm an agnostic, but I'm an atheist. Yeah, I know. I thought it was nuts too. He's that way, he says, because he saw the untenable witness of the believers. Yeah, I don't believe it. There's errors in the Greek text. He's a big proponent of there's errors in the Bible, blah, 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 errors in the Bible. That's the first thing atheists throw out at you, and they're nuts when they do it. But another thing was the life and the message of the church was inconsistent. What it professes from its mouth was one thing. How it actually lived what it professed was another. These guys here at the temple, Hophni and Phinehas, probably had the cool Jewish rhythmic stuff down. They could probably sing from the Torah all day long, the verses that they were supposed to, but they were using them as incantation. They're using them as chant. They're using them as magic kind of spells because they didn't believe them. They didn't have any real power. Why? Because their life demonstrated that it had no power. No priest would have gone along with, well, sure, we'll go get the Ark of the Covenant because that's where God sits, and we'll haul God out to the battlefield. Think about it, folks. I'm going to haul God out to a battlefield. First of all, that implies that God works for whom? You got it. All day long like Donkey Kong. Well, we've got God in a box in our little tent. Let's just go get God in a box and we'll show you. We've got a God in a box. What do you got? Well, now we've got your God in a box. That's what we've got. So they may have said the right stuff. They were priests. They may have done everything outwardly right, but inwardly they were depraved. And actually, outwardly, they weren't even congruent there either. No priest in his rightful mind would have let the ark leave the temple. This is a first and a last in Israel's history. Why? Because God's a little good luck charm. Now, how can they get to this point? How do they get to this point? Because, folks, when you look at the things of God and go, it's not as important as X, Y, and Z, the world sees how unimportant it becomes. And the slide to that is very slippery. Talked about that some in the newsletter that I put out a while back. If you read the newsletter, or if you got the newsletter, apparently one whole skid never made it anywhere. No joke, really, seriously. One whole skid didn't go anywhere. Don't know where it went. One guy in prison probably got them all. So, or maybe those bikers got it. Anyhow. Yeah, I just hope they read them. Is right, Walter. Just the articles, not the guy that wrote the article. Anyhow. The slide on this is very, very fast. And the ark is now lost to Israel. The religious practice is lost to Israel. The ability to go in, if this happens at a certain time of the year, you can't make an atonement. Why? Because the priest goes in once a year to the Holy of Holies and sprinkles blood on the altar, right? Can't happen until that ark comes back. The religious function at the temple stops. All because we wanted to take God in a box into the battlefield. And how do we believe that God was in a box? How did God be devalued from the Holy One of Israel that walked before them in a pillar of fire or in a pillar of cloud, to be reduced to a God in a box? Check this out. Last person to die. Now, the daughter-in-law of Phinehas was pregnant. She gives birth after hearing that the ark has been captured and her father-in-law is dead and her husband is dead. This is a very hard day for this woman, no doubt. And at the time of her death, the woman attending her said, "Do not be afraid, you've borne a son." So why? Because in all the massacre that has occurred in this family, you have a son, you have an individual who can bring back the lineage of this house. Supposedly. That's how Jews think. As long as you have a male heir, the line continues. But what has God said about this line? It's cut off. Totally cut off. That the men from this line will have to beg for jobs at the temple of the menial priestly tasks. Never once rise to prominence again. And she named the child Ichabod. Very interesting name. Yeah, Ichabod Crane. I don't know, what is it, the Sleepy Hollow TV show? I watched it for like 30 seconds and realized I was killing brain cells. And I need them all. So I quit watching. But, you know, I was always wondering as a kid, what does the name Ichabod mean? Why would anybody name a kid a name that's so easily made fun of? And then I realized my name was Ashley. But this isn't a pleasant name. It's not like salvation in my son, the line will continue. No, it's a pretty depressing name. The glory has departed. You don't talk about a kid with a complex his entire life. Because every time they say, Ichabod, come here, you know what they're saying? The glory of the Lord has departed, come here. What a pleasant name, right? It's like naming your kid Sue. Because the ark of God has been captured, because her father-in-law and her husband, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured. We'll look at chapter 1, verse 5, or chapter 5, verse 1, just a minute. And the Philistines captured the ark, and they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. We'll use that later. So they take the ark, and they take it to one of their capital cities.
Whatever happened to Ichabod?
We don't know. Maybe he became a headless horseman. I'm kidding. Don't know, but certainly, if you're named Ichabod, you're either looking for a judge to change that name to something else, like Sue, or Ashley. And because think about it.
So you might be Ichabod and you don't know.
You never know. You never know. But we do know that God had carried out His death sentence on this family. See, when we look at this situation, here's the thing. Was God playing when He said, I'm going to wipe you out? Was God saying, well, I'm going to wipe you out, but it's going to be figurative? This is public, folks. At a battlefield, the ark moves out in a position of prominence, and the priests are there with them, and they die very publicly. And now you have Eli who dies, not because someone stabs him in the heart, but because Eli was a chubby dude who fell over and snapped his own neck under his own weight. You ever watched some of the Darwin Awards? Anybody familiar with the Darwin Awards? The Darwin Awards is given to people that have killed themselves in a means to preserve the human race, to keep them from rebreeding. One of them is a man who decided that he was going to, there's a unit called a JTOW unit. A JTOW unit is a jet-assisted takeoff unit that they strap to C-130s to help them take off on short runway takeoffs. This individual decided to bolt one to the back of an Impala. 63 Impala. It'll go 0 to 300 and it's like 60 seconds and will burn for 15 minutes. He gets out in the desert. He backs up 3 miles in front of a mesa. Now do the math very quickly. 0 to 60, or 0 to 360 seconds and burns for 15 minutes. Does he have enough road? No. You'd figure it'd be helpful if he punched the button while sitting still. He gets the car up to 60 miles an hour first and then pushes the button. How they find all this out is a state trooper comes driving down the road and he sees a smoldering something in the mesa or the butte, whatever you want to call it. And so when he goes up there, he is perplexed at a 63 Impala sticking out the side of a mountain smoldering. Because first he thinks it's an aircraft. And they go back and they retrace it. And they find where he actually applied the brakes because the tires just melted on the road. And then he became airborne. See, he thought he was doing something cool. I'm going to try this out. And he should have gotten on a longer stretch of road. See how he killed himself due to his own pride and ignorance. This guy killed himself due to his own pride and ignorance. You know what you hear a redneck say right before he dies? Hey y'all, watch this. You know what you hear right before his buddy dies? Shoot, I can do it better. Eli was practicing the hey y'all, watch this. God's not watching me. God doesn't care. If God cared, He would have done something. God does care. Eli's death, there's nothing glorious about his death. He doesn't die in battle. Eli doesn't die anywhere. Eli's death is recorded as dying because he's old and fat. How would you like that to be on your epitaph on a tombstone? You died because you were old and fat. Hophni and Phinehas, their epitaphs would read, they died because they were morons. They stole from God. Why? Because the things of God had no real meaning to them. These guys were priests. And notice how that filtered down to all the people. No one ever went, hey, do you really think we should go get the ark from Shiloh and bring it to a battlefield? Do you really think God is there in the box? Do you really think that this is the God that God works for us? See, that's the pagan philosophy. Their gods work for them, and they bribe their gods to do things for them. That's the wrong way of looking at God. We work for God. No one once thought about that. And look at the slaughter that comes out of this. Because of 3 men, 34,000 Israelites lose their lives. See, the consequences of sin, and in America this is a very uncommon idea. We believe very much that our sins only affect us. I'm only responsible for my sin. Actually, folks, you're responsible for your sin, and your sin can be transmuted. Meaning it passes on. It has an effect on a whole congregation. It has an effect on a whole people group. It has an effect on your entire family. See, if we actually realize the pain and fierceness of our sin, we wouldn't sin as much as we thought we would because, oh my goodness, folks, the actions of 2 men killed 34,000 men. You say, not true. Go back and read the story of Achan. The action of 1 man cost the lives of several thousand Israelites again, and then Achan's entire family. This is a constant. This is why Ananias and Sapphira died when they said, we sold everything. And the Holy Spirit killed them right where they stood. Sin is not something to be played with. And sin becomes more and more emboldened in our lives when we take the things of God and hold them cheaply. Because then we begin to think that God works for us. But the good news about this, though, is we can learn from their example. We can look at this example. We can look when we go and see how God is taken into the temple of the Philistines next week and see the power of the one true God and say, wow, I would like to be like the boy Samuel who grows daily in stature with men and with God and with all of Israel. Why? Because I have seen from the text the alternate of those who take for what is theirs only because they can take it because it's there. And we got to ask ourselves, which person do we want to be? Which example do we want to follow? One is going to exalt God, the other one exalts self. And at times, look, we all exalt self. Trust me, folks, and there are times where I get very selfish, especially when I'm on that 4-lane road and I'm the only one there and the person pulls in front of me. I'm so selfish at that moment because I want that person gone. I want God to kill them because they're fat. They're not, but, you know. You ever waited in line long periods of time? You want people to move. Why? Because you're in my way. You're getting between me and what I want. What example are we going to follow? What example do you want to follow? We see the end result of those who pursue self. We see the end result, and it leads to utter tragedy. It leads to someone being named, the glory of God is departed. Or we can follow the example of Samuel, who at least at this point in his life is living a godly life. What example do we want to follow? Let's pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the example that we see here in the text of the lives of Hophni and Phinehas and Eli. How what happens when we take you for granted, take your love for granted, take your grace for granted, take your mercy for granted. Well, I'll just sin and God will forgive me. God's a forgiving guy. I can do whatever I want and I'll come on Sunday and ask for His forgiveness. We see here, just as in the days of Hophni and Phinehas, as today, that a lot of times we tax that forgiveness. Let's take from this example of the lives that we don't want to be. It's easy for us to follow the role of Hophni and Phinehas. It exhorts self. It's something that we like at times. We want to get the things we want. At times I fall into this trap. Let us keep our eye focused on the example of Samuel, who grows in the knowledge of you, who grows in the example of godliness, who the Spirit of the Lord speaks to as he does at Shiloh again. We ask for your blessing upon us. We ask these things in your name we pray. Amen. All right.